That's lucky that worked so quickly, because I've been up since 4 in the morning and I rarely see the second 9 o'clock in a day. So I'm on borrowed time. I just want to start by thanking Nature Nanaimo for providing this forum and bringing folks out tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're on the territory of the Nanaimo people, and Harewood Plains is definitely in their territory. And I'm Paul Chapman. I'm with the Nanaimo Area Land Trust, NALT, founded in 1995. Our mission is to support, protect, and promote protective of natural values of land and water in our area. We have 400 some odd members and 600 volunteers, and we always welcome more members. That's not poaching. You can be members of both organizations. So no, we're a friendly group here. I just want to, looking at this screen, you've seen a lot of the pictures of the different flowers that exist, but I want to draw your attention to these two maps in the upper left here. This one here, in the sort of pink area there, that's showing the Gary Oak Meadows of the Harewood Plains. And then this one near the top, that's the purple is showing the coastal Douglas fir forest. So those two things are attached, right? Gary Oak Meadow is a subsystem of a coastal Douglas fir forest. And that's there, and they're incredibly rare. And these maps were developed as part of NALT's priority places mapping project, and has been presented to the city as a priority conservation area. Yeah, and so I'll keep referring back to those maps, the CDF, the coastal Douglas fir, and the Gary Oak, as we go through some different slides. This one shows the two things. You have the Lotus Pinatus parks, and then over to the right of the screen, you have a covenanted area. So there's part of a density transfer that happened. So part of this property used to exist to the north of the parkway, and there was a density transfer offered. So they built these, these houses in here in a much denser pattern than they would have been allowed, and the trade-off for the citizens of Nanaimo were the Lotus Pinatus parks, these two parks, and as well as this covenanted area. The parks are public, the covenant is private land. There's a mechanism in place where that could become public land as part of a park dedication, another density transfer. So count that, 2 density transfers on that one piece of land, and or as a eco gift. So right now that covenant area is private land. It may well become public land if the development permit process, it works through its full system. So I should mention, I'm going to concentrate on the one property that's within the city of Nanaimo that is currently in the subdivision approvals process. That's what I'm going to look at today. That's climate, other than climate change, the biggest challenge to biodiversity is going to be building things on this land. There's the development concept. I think Wiley had a better photo of it, but I can, sort of walk you through it here. If you can see my cursor, this is Lotus Pinatus Way, right? So if you park under the, by the underpass of the parkway and walk in that road, you end up here in Lotus Pinatus Way. If you look on this map, on this conceptual image, now this is a conceptual image. We haven't seen what the drawings in the subdivision approval process are like, but so this is the best we have to go from. We don't know what those final drawings are like. But if I walk in here, there's a road, and here's some housing, and here's some other housing, and the road goes along, and there's more multifamily units here, single family units here, and you can see they go right up to the border of the park, right? And then between the two parks, they go right down to the border of the Parkway development permit area. So there's a setback that has to be or should be observed along the parkway. So they go right down to the parkway setback, and then this park is it's surrounded by housing here, a road at the top of the slope, more housing going in here, and roads that go in with those housing. So there's a whole road network. This is a multi-unit string here, and then back into single family here, right up to the covenant edge. There are quite a few development permits in place. We heard someone speak about that earlier, about the different development permit approvals that have to go through. Sensitive area development approval, steep slope, unstable slope, wildfire. So there's all these different things that the city requires for a developer to address. But you know, the rigors of those things, I would say, if you've ever seen a Gary Oak Meadow developed, you've seen an environmentally sensitive area developed under the approval process that exists within the city. So even though those things are in place, developments do happen on them. Yeah, and then also, if you think about what we have here, is we're protecting an area of Gary Oak Meadow, and another area of Gary Oak Meadow, and another area of Gary Oak Meadow, but we're disregarding the coastal Douglas fir that exists upslope of those Gary Oak Meadows. So it's like we've said, this is important here. We need to protect this thing, but we haven't thought about what conditions go to contribute to make that thing so special, right? I've got my my professional notes I wrote down for today's meeting. I just wanted to, you know, I wanted to say it's a fine balance and it's a delicate balance, and I'm not sure that this is in balance. So there, I'm just looking again, those parks in the covenant area and the map, you know, the concept of the development. Again, I've been told that this isn't the development or the subdivision that's in the approval process, but this is the best we have. This is a map that's off of the developer's website. There's a couple different images. So some time and money has gone into this. So this is some idea of the concept of the development that's that they intend to go forward with. And again, it's those, you know, those roads on the upslope and the buildings on the upslope, you know, hovering over the Gary Oak Meadows that are downslope from them. And species at risk, we've seen this map again, right? So that big yellow swath in here, that's, you know, most of the Hosakia pinnatus. There's a couple little bits of it that exist in Lotus pinnatus Park. And there are, you know, other areas of species at risk. But I think it's important too, and I think it was Staffen at the beginning mentioned it, it's not just what's in those big open meadows that's the rare beauty of this place, but it's also what's like in the understory of the coastal Douglas fir. Like you walk through there and you see the Calypso bulbosa, right? The fairy slipper orchid in numbers that you don't normally see around here, right? Like there's some really rare, I come up with catchphrases for things, mostly because it makes it easier for me to remember. So this is an area of rare abundance, right? Those two things that don't normally exist together, rare abundance. We have it here. And this is a map of the hydrology. This is a desktop, you know, this hasn't been ground truth, but looking at the land and the shape of the land and how water might run across it. And I think it's probably a pretty accurate. So this is that western side of the property, and there's a ridge line here. And the water runs down slope, you know, imagine that, water runs downhill. You've got to pay a lot for a map to find that out. But water runs downhill, right? And all along here, it all runs downhill. So, and then at the covenanted area, you can see it's running downhill. And like Scott said, it's, you know, the contributions of the connections of that hydrology exist in the private managed forest land. So the conditions that come together to make those rare and abundant plant communities and those you know, provide a space for those imperiled species, it all depends on that interconnected, depends on the upslope. We can't say, here's the plant, let's protect that area. We have to think, what provides for that plant and protect that area. So I've dumbed it down, grossly dumbed down the hydrology by putting these white arrows on here. So you can sort of get a general idea of the flow. It's from upslope to downslope, right? So whatever interventions happen upslope will affect that flow of water downslope. You can't really see that, but that's that, again, that development, conceptual development, right? So if you think about where the buildings and the roads are, they are interrupting that water flow. That, the hydrology of the land is being stopped by roads and stopped by foundations. And the development permit process would say, the hydrology must be being maintained, that it can't be disturbed by development. But I don't know how you do that if you put a road in there. And I don't know how you do it if you put a number of foundations in there and more than one road. There's going to be a disruption to the hydrology. And in fact, some of those foundations exist on top of those rare plant communities. I don't know how that you protect those in this situation. And we've talked a lot about Hassaikia pinnata, and again, it's Nanaimo's official floral emblem. And this is that iNaturalist, those green sites show the occurrences that have been recorded on iNaturalist of Hassaikia pinnatus in the area. And how rare is it? Well, that's how rare it is. That little red dot on Vancouver Island, that's where the Hassaikia pinnatus exists. If I stretch this map out across all of Canada, there wouldn't be another red dot. If I drag it down the coast, it starts to show up, because that's where those vernal seeps exist, or the vernal pools exist that Scott talked about. But here, it's here, and it's nowhere else. So here again, there's the development concept overlaid over the map. There are those occurrences of Hassaikia pinnatus. So this cluster here, this dense cluster here, exists under where in this drawing there are a number of houses. So that's roads, that's driveways, that's foundations, that's roofs, that's yards, right? I don't see how Hassaikia pinnatus can continue to exist there. And over here, this is I think probably what most people think of when they think of the Harewood Plains, that place where we've seen all that disruption from those ATVs, right? Well, this is in that covenanted area. But when you put the hydrology overlay on that, you can see that the roads and the construction of houses will disrupt that hydrology too. And again, it's a fine balance, and it's a delicate balance. And will these rare plants continue to exist if we do this development? I think it's a question we don't want to ask. I don't think we want to find out if they do or don't. I think we want to find out. I think we want to protect what we have, what we know we have, and that rare abundance that happens nowhere else except for here. So bear with me now. This is my artistic license as we roll through it, but I'm going to walk you along Lotus Pinnatus Way, the road that they're going to build. So here we are. This is as you're entering the property and through that CDF forest. Here's Lotus Pinnatus Way. This will be a road. I won't let it run to the end, but if I did, you'd come across some flagging tape that's already gone up in this area. Again, this is that area where the buildings exist on either side of the road. So to the right of the screen, you have multifamily housing, and to the left, all the way down slope till you hit the parkway setback, you have housing. And this is a Garry Oak Meadow. This is that unstable slope area. So just downslope from that is where the road will ride. And it's the road at the top of the ridge, immediately upslope of that larger Lotus Pinnatus part. This is the same area, right? So this is road. This is what we're looking at. This is going to be road, and below that road will be houses. And underfoot, what we have is some of that rare abundance, right? We have Calypso bulbosa, right? We have, it's an amazing, and there's more. I was just wandering through one day and trying to figure out how my phone works. But, and then as we go out of the CDF, we get into the open meadows, and we run into, checkered lily, chocolate lily. So this is what is at stake here. There's this abundance of this rare abundance. And, you know, we heard of $12.9 million. That's the asking price right now for this piece of property. Now that's aspirational, right? He's bought it for 5.7, I think, in 2020. He's asking 12.9. That's maybe what he figures the value would be if that subdivision approval goes through. He's done some work, he flips it for 12.9. I don't think that's the cost. You determine these things by appraisal. You don't just throw millions of dollars at a thing. You figure out what the actual cost of it is and then make your offer based on that, like you would if you're buying a house, right? Same deal. You don't say, oh, somebody's asking 5 million, here you go. You find out what the house is actually worth. It's the same deal when we're looking at conservation lands. We get an appraisal done. We base an offer off of that appraisal. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be more expensive than anything we've ever done. But I'd say that the cost of losing it is going to be greater still. And I would say that it's not going to be nearly as expensive as, say, a waterfront walkway would be, right? So these aren't numbers that we don't consider as a community, that the city hasn't thought about. They've thought about $15 to $30 million for a waterfront walkway from the BC Ferries terminal to the beach at Departure Bay. Well, this looks like a pretty good deal in comparison to that in my eyes. So I think, what we need to do, NALT is having conversations with the folks we need to have conversations with. I can't really get into details of that because they have their own process about how they like to do things. But we're talking with groups that have big money that do these sorts of things on this scale. So we're having those conversations. We're trying to bring them on board about, and most of them know what the Harewood Plains is. They know how rare and wonderful it is. So we're having those conversations. I think it'd be, there's some pamphlets here. I've only printed a few off because they're brand new. And mayor.council@nanaimo.ca. That's the email to contact mayor and council. Tell them how important this place is to you. Tell your MLA, tell your MP. This place is so important. This is a unique place. And once it's gone, it's not coming back. The city spent many years trying to grow Hosakia Panatis at their works yard, and we're unable to do it. The idea was they wanted to spread it. They wanted it to be more places. They couldn't do it. It's not something that happens easily. If it happened easily, it'd be everywhere. We'd be trying to figure out how to keep it out of our gardens. But that's not the case. It's incredibly rare, and we shouldn't consider risking that. Yeah, that's the presentation. It's 9 o'clock, the other 9 o'clock. Yeah, thank you. And I'd be happy to repeat any questions and answer them. Derek.
Well, I had the good fortune of having the Harewood Plains as my playground growing up. Obviously, that was a long time ago. Most of the Harewood Plains is behind Chase River. I grew up at Starks Crossing, which is right across Chase River School. So I remember the rare abundance. We as kids used to play on them. What we call the bluffs. Flowers were everywhere. We didn't really vandalize the area because we didn't have motorbikes or camped out there. There was no Cinnabar Valley. It was just a beautiful, beautiful area. The worst we did was go in and pop some fir trees, like cones for $5 a sack for the forest.
So for you guys on the Zoom lesson, Derek Cowling is admitting to some vandalism he did when he was a young kid.
Responsible for my actions. I'd like to clarify some things. I think one of the things that received a good portion of Harewood Plains so far is the urban containment boundary that the city sort of stuck with. I know Mosaic would love to have that boundary go out and be able to open up that area to develop. The development you're talking about was within the urban. So beyond the power line, then it's the regional.
Yeah, so Derek's asking about the urban containment boundary and the role that's had in protecting the plains. And he's pointed out that if you've been on the Harewood Plains, where the power lines run, that's essentially to the north of that is within the city, and to the south of that for a ways is in the regional district. And to the south of that, the power lines, and to the south of that is private managed forestry lands, mosaic lands. The property to the north that is under the subdivision approval process is within the city containment boundary. So it's the promise there is that services will be provided in the development of that land. At this point, it looks like the cost of bringing those services there is really prohibitive, which makes me think that this subdivision approval process is really about just jacking up the price of the land, not really about subdivision. I mean, I'm hopeful that way, because the cost of blasting to bring in sewer and water and and power and whatever other services are going to cost a lot of money to develop there. So yeah, the part I'm looking at is within the city growth, and the area to the south of the power lines is in the regional district. It's a different different set of regulations for developing that and bringing it out of private managed forestry into development. And Mosaic would not say that that's what they're interested in. Whether or not they look at that and try and figure out what the highest value of the land is, that'd be something that they would do internally. But I would say that the most imperiled piece right now is that piece within the city. That's 103 Lotus Panatis Way. It's where the surrounds those two parks, and that's the most imperiled piece at this point in time. There's a question back there. The question is Wiley still on the Zoom?
I am.
There's a lot of aerials and butterflies in the air. That area, I don't know, I was aware of that area.
Yeah, it's a statement about there being Gary Oak to the left or to the west of the covenant area. So I'm just going to go. So there's the covenant area is on the easternmost point of the land there, and for sure there's some like those sort of thin bands of Douglas fir that Scott showed to the west of that, but it isn't until you start getting up by Lotus Panatis Park that there's a denser forest. To the immediate west of the conservation area is definitely mostly meadows with some trees between them, and for sure all of it is depending on either providing or depending on those vernal seeps. Yes, the housing will be in that. From the conceptual drawing we've seen, a lot of the housing will sit right on top of those meadows between the parks and the covenanted area. Another question.
I'm confused with the covenant area. Now, you access that from the human way?
You could if you were intent on trespass, because it's private, right? So, but yes, that's nearest McEwen Way.
And just covenant means.
Sorry, and the question was where is the access to the covenant area, and the closest road is McEwen Way. And I've been pointed out that I haven't really explained a covenant. And a covenant is a legal agreement registered on the title of land. And in this case, it's a no build, no disturbance covenant. So no matter who owns that land, that covenant rides with it. But there's a provision in the covenant for it to become park or part of an eco gift. So it's kind of a unique covenant that way. It could change into park. And I'm not entirely clear if the covenant would then still travel with the land as park. There's some language in it that suggests it does, but it would probably have to be pointed out in the beginning of the process to make sure it did. There's another question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you think there's more value in having individual letters, or if having groups like the Council of Canadians or the Nanaimo Climate Action have, or our church writing a letter.
I think that at this point in time, the question was, thank you. The question was, is there more value in having groups write letters or individuals write letters? And I think at this point in time, I mean, there's no form letter created for this. I think at this point in time, the more letters they receive, city council, the better, to let them know how important this place is to you. So it's on their radar. You know, I'm sure that they're not so mercenary as to equate letters received with votes, but you know, for sure that's part of the calculation, right?
Somebody actually has created a letter template, and it's like a QR code that you can scan. You're coming off Harewood Mines Road, you're entering, there's a little piece of paper, you can scan it, and that's
So Hunter was just pointing out that somebody has started a petition or a letter, form letter.
It's a letter template.
Yeah, a letter template that's from a scannable QR code at the head of the trail at
Harewood Mines Road.
Harewood Mines Road. So that wasn't me.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Have you approached the Nature Conservancy
Uh,
to help with the purchase?
I've spoken with a number of groups around the purchase of this. That's the question is who have we spoken with? I've spoken with BC Parks Foundation. I've got information going to the Sitka Foundation. I've spoken with the Land Trust Alliance BC about it. So we're working our way through these different groups that you know, can bring significant funds to this project. I'm waiting to hear back.
There are two, if you click on the chat. There. Chat
It's up at the top.
on the top, so, yeah.
So the question there is, does the city of Nanaimo show interest in purchasing the area? I think that there's a bit of a chill on comments from the councillors at this point because it's in the subdivision approval process. And I imagine they're a bit wary about influencing that process one way or the other. But I would say that in the city plan document that, you know, was part of the Reimagine Nanaimo process, when you look at, they've got sort of big fuzzy aspirational dots about where they want to acquire future parkland. There's a big fuzzy aspirational dot on this property. So it's stated in their city plan that they're interested in expanding their parks here. And, you know, they've gone through the effort of securing the 2 pockets of Lotus Pinnatus Park, as well as the covenanted area. So I'd say that there is interest. They're just not stating it right now.
There's a previous question to that one.
And the previous question is, can parts of the Reimagine Nanaimo strategy be leveraged to protect the plains? Yes. Like I said, they have indicated that that is a place that they want to expand their parks, right? So I mean that it's not outside of their policy, outside of their direction to expand the parks there. I think the you know, they'll have to be convinced of the delicacy of the connections that provide that rarity, the importance of it to the community, and the importance of it to you know, the ecology of the area. And I don't think that should be very hard to convince them of that. And then, you know, through this subdivision approval process, that'll go out for referrals to different agencies. And it'll be informative to see what the word is coming back on that. Like if there's a referral to the Watershed Stewardship Act, WSA? Water Sustainability Act. You know, what will the word come back from the province on that be? So I think that there's lots of opportunities here. Now, in terms of the housing piece of that, I swear right now, if you promise to do build a rental housing, they'd let you build it in the middle of a lake. You know, like they seem, but I think, you know, it's this false dichotomy. We don't have to choose environment or housing, right? In fact, as we move into denser housing situations, we need more spaces where we can be outside together as well, or outside apart from each other. And so, I think it's really about increasing our density in our housing, about those, being nearer to each other and nearer to services, as well as increasing how much land that we protect in common. There's a question back there.
When I was a student, walking the Buttercups area, which is now Buttercups Marsh, it was not protected. And I was scared because I love that area. It was so beautiful and had so much wildlife that I would hear every time I went through. Have we learned anything from how that got protected, that we can move forward in some way in the same manner, or how did that happen?
So the question is, have we learned any lessons from acquisition like we did at Buttertubs that we could apply here? And an important piece of the Buttertubs acquisition was it was part of the Millennium Fund that was part of the Centennial celebrations, where there was suddenly like $20 million available for what became the Nature Trust of BC to buy significant areas. And Buttertubs was its second purchase. So I think the lesson learned is that we can free up money from bigger centers like Vancouver through organizations like BC Parks Foundation and apply that money here to protect areas. There's a question over here.
This is far fetched, maybe, but I understand that the specific license plates for the parks have been very successful in creating money for the park. And I was wondering, just when you get a Harewood Plains, the beautiful flower one, to get everybody excited about it and raise some money.
So the question was, could things like the parks license plates that have raised money for BC Parks be something we could recreate for Harewood Plains? So that money goes to BC Parks, which is a very different thing than BC Parks Foundation. I don't know that they would create license plates where the money would go into provincial coffers that they would then redirect towards. So, but I think promotion of the plains is going to be an important part of saving the plains for sure.
There's one more question in the chat.
I think we're going to need to end this soon. So how about one more question from the chat and one more question from the floor?
What is communication strategy this time?
What is the communication strategy at this time?
This is it.
It's a longer question if you scroll it down.
Do you mind scrolling down to it?
Can you read it to us or? Well, then they wouldn't be able to do everyone.
What is the communication strategy at this time as far as reaching out to the community at large to rally around protection and the benefits of that to the city? For example, ecotourism. Has that angle been explored yet? I would say that so I think the question is looking at broader things like what are the economic benefits of ecotourism and how would that apply to tours of Harewood Plains. But I think the closest we're coming to that are with things like the guided walks that are happening on the 20th, and NALT is hosting one on the 27th, where we're promoting the plains to the community. You're a select group of well-informed people, and every one of you has got to spread the word from here. But most people may have heard about the Harewood Plains, probably not, and won't know where it is or why it's so important to this community. So I think that that's the initial stages of the communication campaign, and then certainly as working with Nature Nanaimo as NALT ramps up its efforts, that communication campaign will go up further.
One more question.
I'm just wondering, have you presented all of this information to mayor and council?
I presented a larger presentation about all of the areas in Nanaimo that NALT would prioritize for conservation, of which Harewood Plains was a piece of it. And I was hoping that would sort of catalyze a longer discussion with the city. But the day after that meeting was an in-camera meeting the day after that. So I did that presentation on the 17th of May. On the 18th of May, the subdivision approval process was entered into. So that sort of made this a discussion that they are hesitant to have, I would say.
So I think reluctantly, we need to wind this up. So thank you to staff and Wiley, Scott and Paul for excellent presentations. I think we all need to think about what's next. This Saturday, Nature Nanaimo has a walk to Harewood Plains. You meet on Harewood Mines Road, just past the parkway, just after you go under the parkway. And then, as Paul just mentioned, NALT is doing a walk to Harewood Plains on Saturday, the 27th, also 10 a.m., I believe. Nature Nanaimo would prefer you to let them know you're going to come by emailing naturenanaimo@gmail.com. And on the NALT website, you can register for the walk. So going and taking friends and showing them is one thing you can do. As has been mentioned, email mayor and council. You've learned a whole bunch of stuff tonight that whatever you're passionate about, whatever caught your attention, write to mayor and council, and it's easy. It's mayor.council@nanaimo.ca. So, and that'll get them all. And then the other thing is that as we move forward with this Harewood Plains working group, we are going to need money, because Paul mentioned we need to have an appraisal of the land. That's one of the starting things you need to do. And I've been involved in the past in writing funding grants for various things, and funders always want to know, you know, you've got some money from your supporters, you've got some money from this foundation and this group over here, and it all comes together to make the total that you need. So NALT has set up a bank account, and if you go to their website, you can donate specifically for Harewood Plains, and that will just be the startup money, okay? So again, you get tax receipts from NALT, yes. And so thank you all for coming. And again, thank you to our speakers. See you on the trail.